because I think the author has requested me to remove my mask, but we will see how it goes. Of course, the most important thing is to put your mobile phones on silent. And remember, this is an all-mask event, and please maintain social distance. And that's it. Enjoy. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very special guest, Mahathir, Dr. Asma. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the author.
Not yet, not yet, not yet. Yasmin, Yasmin.
who will be with us in a short while. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our author of today, our special guest, Yang Amat Bahagia, Tun Dr. Mahathir. That's why they want you to sit far away. Yang Amat Bahagia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, Yang Amat Bahagia, Dr. Hasna, Yang Amat Bahagia, Dr. Muhammad Zainal Sha'ari, Director of the NPH Group, and Ms. Norma P, Group CEO of NPH, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, salam sejahtera, selamat pagi dan selamat datang diucapkan. A very good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday morning. Welcome to the virtual launch of Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's new book, Capturing Hope, The Struggle Continues for a New Malaysia. Now, this event is also being broadcast live on social media, on MPH Group Publishing's Facebook page, and to Dr. Mahathir's Facebook page and Instagram page too, IG Live as well. So thank you once again, Dr. Mahathir, for honoring us with this event, and I hope we'll learn a little bit more about you and of course about your book this morning. Well, I'm sure Dr. Mahathir needs absolutely no introduction to anyone here, anyone in the country, and probably anyone in the entire world. Some of you may already know a little bit about the book being launched, but let me briefly introduce both the author and the book, especially for viewers joining us on social media right now. Besides being the 4th and 7th Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir is also the author of several books, including the best-selling A Doctor in the House. He's also a devoted husband to Dr. Sigi, and so much more. But most importantly, Dr. Mahathir has and continues to play a role in our nation's history and politics, and we hope to do so for the foreseeable future. Now maybe I should take my mask off. It's sometimes a bit difficult if you can't see the mouth move. I will not face you. Now a little bit about the book. Although it's not a direct sequel to A Doctor in the House, I hope you've all read A Doctor in the House, Capturing Hope chronologically follows from that best-selling memoir. And Tun tries to set the record straight regarding the Pakatan Harapan government and his second tenure as Prime Minister of Malaysia. It begins after his retirement and then his re-entry into politics, the Pakatan Harapan coalition's victory in the 14th Malaysia general election, and his return to the premiership, to the events that led to the fall of the Pakatan Harapan government and where Malaysia stands today, and throughout our learned gentleman's viewpoints, comments and opinions. Very, very interesting and captivating too. So given Dr. Mahathir's part in Malaysian history and politics, we hope this book will be a key contribution to the growing body of literature that chronicles and discusses these two topics and provides much food for thought to current and future generations of leaders. So the first thing we're going to do, Dr. Mahathir, is unveil the book. So we'd like to invite you to just move to where the book is. And maybe 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There's a book inside.
This is the budiey. So you see, left is right.
And you're holding a camera.
I was fishing a camera. And the camera in the mirror took this picture.
And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the official launch of Capturing Hope. So thank you very much. Dr. Mahathir will return to our discussion. It's a very nice photograph, by the way. So now let's dive in and have a quick discussion to learn more about this book. Before that, to our friends who are following us on Facebook and IG Live, don't forget on Facebook Live, you can ask the author a question yourself and hopefully you will answer it. So you just have to leave your question in the comments section. So we'll start. You know, the reasons Dr. Mahathir wrote this book may already be known, but for the benefit of those who don't know, would you like to tell us what you hope to accomplish by writing this book?
Well, in a way, it is a sequence to the first book, but not quite a sequence because things change completely. So I had to record what happened after I stepped down and why I have to come back and be involved in politics again. It's not my wish. It's just that lots of people came to see me, asking me, please do something. So the something that I did initially was to try and advise, but the advice was not acted upon. And finally, I had to actually form a party and contest in the election. That's how I came back.
So, by writing this book, what's your aim? What's your goal? Writing this book.
I think lots of people do not know much about the history, the recent history of this country. Some young people, for example, when they were born, the country had already partially developed. And they feel that this is a situation all the while, even before, but it's not. So there is a need to remind us that the country is moving. We came from being a colony of the British, we became independent, we were very poor, and subsequently we were able to develop the country to the point where the country was recognized as an Asian tiger. And then after that, we had some changes in the leadership, and now it is called a kleptocracy. You see, so people must know what happened. Why did the Asian tiger become a kleptocracy? You see, so I hope to capture something of this in the book.
I don't think any of us imagined that after such a huge victory and a long-awaited victory, that the Pakatan Harapan government would fall so soon. All the events that have led to our current situation, which I'm sure are quite unique. Was it difficult for you to write the later chapters of the book, you know, even as other things were happening?
Well, it's extremely difficult, especially when I try to compare the present with the more successful past. It involves me, and I will be trying to say, oh, before when I was Prime Minister, it was all time. But I just cannot say that. I have to try to explain that before it was okay, now it's not okay, and you have to make a comparison between the past and the present without my mentioning too much about my role in it. Because it's embarrassing to praise myself for having done something for the country and then to point out that others have failed. It is as if I'm the only one who knows how. other people don't know anything. So it is very difficult to write, to make this comparison without practically praising myself.
And you must have, while writing the book, reached a point where everything seemed to be very positive and moving forward very well. And then it all went upside down, right? Well, before Capturing Hope, a lot of people wrote and spoke about Pakatan Harapan's 2 years in power, and a few of them appear to lay the blame squarely on you, Dr. Mahathir. So what would you say to them and to those who claim that you're actually rewriting the history of the Pakistan government with this book?
There must be some good reason why people blame me, because I was at the center of all the activities. But I tried to explain that it wasn't me. I am forced to take action because of what happened, what has happened, which the others have taken action. For example, I did not want to leave Pakatan Harapan. I thought that we would go to full term. Of course, I have made the understanding that I should hand over this, the Prime Minister. And then there was talk about changing government. I couldn't imagine how you can change government without an election. But what they had done is they subverted my supporters, caused them to cross over to the losers and give the losers the majority. So much so that the government had to fall. Now when the government falls, I couldn't very well stay as Prime Minister. So I was disappointed with my own party, which rejected my advice. And I thought that if people have no faith in me as a leader, I must resign. So I resigned because of that. But at the same time, of course, the party has lost the power, and a new party is forming. They invited me to be the head of the new party, but I rejected that. I cannot very well work with people I had been against before. So in the end, my resignation involves also resignation from being Prime Minister. After that, of course, the action is taken over by the people who brought down the government, principally because from my party, Bersatu, many of them crossed over to support their opponent, and then from PKR, a faction broke away and joined and gave the majority to the opposition so that it could become the government. If it becomes the government, I refuse to be associated with them. So I am now out. I have lost my position as the Prime Minister. So now it is a government, not through election.
And now you've formed your own party. So where are you going with that?
Well, when Najib went wrong, I tried to advise him, I failed. And then I tried to apply pressure on him, trying to get the people to reject him, but that also failed. So I decided that I would form a party against him. But one party alone cannot defeat Najib. It's too powerful. It has to be an opposition, the coalition. So I had to join the opposition. Not that I agree with all that, but the only way to defeat Najib was to join the opposition and let the opposition, 4 parties, fight against him. He did strategy worked, and he was defeated. But then my own party, which helped to defeat Najib, now decided to join him and help him. In fact, he caused this thing to happen by saying that this government is not a Malay Muslim government. It is a Chinese government. It is controlled by DAP and the like. And this works with a lot of Malays. They are always worried about their insecurity. So they give support to this new coalition, which is not the result of an election, but rather subversion of members of the government. So, after Bersatu joined them, I still feel a need to bring down this government, because this government is a corrupt government. It did not come into power through election. It just subverted people to cross over, party hopping. So I thought that the original aim of setting Bersatu is still needed. So how do I go about it? So I decided that there is room for just one more party. And actually, it is a replicate of Bersatu, accepting that for Pejuang, we have to make sure that the people who join Pejuang are sincere in their attempt to clean up the government, change the government, and provide Malaysia with a good governance.
Dr. Mahathir, there's a lot about 1MDB in your book. We're just continuing from what you just said. Excuse me. And of course, other people have published books about the scandal, they've written TV shows, and I believe there's a movie as well coming out. But there's some still who don't know very much about it and the impact that it continues to have on the country. So, in a nutshell, what do you think 1MDB has actually done to Malaysia, and will Malaysia ever shake off this impact?
Well, I should begin actually for the reasons why 1MDB was formed. Now, Najib talks about cash is king. He believes that if you give a lot of money, people will support you. But he didn't have a lot of money. He used government money somewhere, but he needed a lot of money, billions. So the government cannot borrow more than 53% of the GDP. But that's not enough for him. In order to borrow more, he took it away from the government, set up a company which is not subjected to the rules which applies to the government on borrowing. So once he sets up this company, it's a company 100% owned by the government, but not subjected to the rules which applies to the government with regard to borrowing. So once he sets up this company, he could then borrow a lot of money. And he borrowed 42 billion ringgit, where before we never even exceed 1 billion when we borrow. He borrowed 42 billion. He went through the process of buying power plants and all that, but a lot of the money was shunted off, and we find that the money has traveled all over the world. He went to Saudi Arabia, he went to the Caribbean, he went to the Seychelles, and then he went to Singapore, and from Singapore it goes into Julu's bank. And then somehow the money got into Najib's account. He says he doesn't know.
I like the way you say somehow. I'm sorry. And so then into Najib's bank, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. Once it's Najib's bank, it is his intention to have this lots of money at his disposal. So once he has this lots of money in the bank, he could dole out huge sums of money to a lot of people, including, of course, UMNO. UMNO divisions were given tons of money. And then anybody who comes with a problem to him, he would give money. So to say that he doesn't know is absurd. He knows very well. He signs a check. He knows the money is there. He knows he can dole out a lot of money. But now he is denying that he knows anything at all about the money in his own account. If you read Nazir's book, you'll find the whole story told about 1MDB. Even Nazir was involved. Initially, he thought it was an innocent account, but later on he found that the money that was coming in It's not the gifts from the Saudis, but actually stolen money from one NDB.
And this will impact Malaysia for some time, right?
When you borrow 42 billion, it will take you years to pay back. In the meantime, even the interest on that is very high. It's about $2 billion a year, 2 billion ringgits a year to pay interest. That's a big chunk of the budget. So for a long time, the future generation will be bearing the burden. Of course, he doesn't care because it's not going to be his, you see, but it's the government which has to pay. And of course, during this pandemic and the time, the government's revenue went down, but they had to pay service the loans, because if you don't, the country can be declared bankrupt.
Wow, what to say to that? Goodness. Let's talk about this idea. You seem to be of the opinion that Malaysians still speak of both domestic and foreign issues through a racial lens. So, don't you think that's more reflection of how issues of religion, education, language, and so on have actually been politicized, right? And if many among the current crop of leaders can't be relied to take Malaysians out of these racial silos, who is going to kickstart this process?
Well, at the beginning when we were struggling for independence, we need the cooperation and the support of all the communities. So the communities insist that their identity should be maintained. So even when they become Malaysians, their identity, their connection with the countries they came from must be maintained. So in Malaysia, Malaysians link their race to the countries they come from. They are not like their great-grandfathers who were born in China and comes here. They're born here, brought up here, grew up here, but they still link with the previous. So this divides the people. This is a Chinese Malaysian, this is an Indian Malaysian, this is a Malay. So because of that, they cannot be assimilated. In other countries, multiracial countries, once they adopt the citizenship of a country, they identify themselves only with that country and no longer with their previous where their grandfathers came. For example, President Eisenhower is German. He led America against Germany because to him he is an American, not a German. But here we still have people looking back to the old country where they came from and adopting some of the practices there, like changing names, for example, because China decided to spell names with a lot of X, Z and all that. Now Malaysians are also doing that. But we are Malaysians, we have our own Chinese, you see, but the tendency is always to identify with the country of origin. So this separates the people. You are of Chinese origin, you are of Indian origin, you are a Malay, local indigenous people. So because of this identity with race on the ground among the people, you cannot have a multiracial party that is trusted by everyone. So, but politics in Malaysia has always been based on race. Until, of course, but it's not all true. Because we have a lot of Indians and Arabs who came here, become Malays, because they talk their own language, they speak Malay, they have Malay custom, they were names and all that were Malay names. They were accepted by the Malays as Malays, even though it's obvious that they were not Malays, you see. But the others do not want to identify themselves with Malays. That is a problem.
Do you think we should follow Indonesia's exercise, which was a very tough one and was not very well accepted by the population, but they were forced to And so now everyone is Indonesian.
Yeah, but as you know, the Chinese make up 10%, although much bigger than in Malaysia. They make up 10%. Of the 100%, 90% were Indonesian. So if you want to get around in Indonesia, if you don't adopt the Indonesian language and behave like Indonesian, you find yourself isolated. But in Malaysia, of course, we have 26 to 30% Chinese and 10% Indian, and they preserve their own community and their own custom, their own ways of living. So they are not, for example, let's say, the Chinese eat with chopstick. We eat with your hands. They have not adopted the Malaysian way of taking food. They retain the chopstick, which is an identity with China, not with Malaysia, and many other things.
Very interesting food for thought, Dr. Mahathir. I think we've had enough of me chit-chatting with you, and we should now open to members of the media. As you can see, we have full attendance. In fact, I thought that we had to actually turn people away because of the space allowed in this venue. So let's start with a question from members of the media. You just please put your hand up, state your name and who you represent. Ooh. There we have.
Morning, Tun. Mustakil from Malaysia now. Tun, DAP Publicity Secretary Tony Pua has published the third part of his response to your allegation today. Number one, he said you are influenced by businessmen and that he was never given the chance to meet you. Can you confirm that it was him that you met and why he wasn't given the chance to meet you?
As you know, I didn't name him. But obviously, he understands that what I say is about him, which in itself is proof that what I say is true. Because why should he respond if it is about somebody else? He is the one who took a long time to respond 3 times, writing long essays on that. So that is one thing. The other thing is that I did call Wali. I told him that this man is causing a lot of problems. He's behaving like a minister, calling out officers and all that, asking them to brief him, and he did meet a lot of business people. Now, business people by definition are capitalists. He doesn't like capitalists. He's basically a socialist. But I have a different idea about that, because I believe that capitalists, by their investment, can create wealth, create jobs and all that. But he feels that I'm doing this because they are capitalists. It's not true. I have a lot of very poor people, very poor businessmen, lots of them, but they fail. If they fail, they are not my crony. If they succeed, then they are my crony. But the ones who succeed are very few. And it is not because they are capitalists that I favor them. The job is to give a good life to all the people in Malaysia, rich and poor, different races and all that, doesn't matter. But we want to develop the country. The development of the country cannot be only by the rich without the poor working. And I talked to the unions. In fact, I don't know whether you notice it or not. I'm very friendly with the unions. The unions all work with me because what I did is in favor of the union. But Tony Paul, of course, doesn't notice that. All the things I still maintain is true. That he was behaving as if he is a minister, and this is causing a lot of problem with the business climate in this country.
Dr. Mahathir, perhaps you'd like to explain about the creation of this position of political secretary.
Well, you know, a long time ago, He was during the time of Tun Razak, when he was Prime Minister. A lot of his supporters complained that they are not having any role at all. On the other hand, many of the ministers complain that they cannot attend to their constituency because they are so busy with government work. So the idea came, it was suggested that we should have a post called political secretary. And the job of the political secretary is to look into what's happening on the ground and keep the minister informed so that the minister can respond to what is happening on the ground. But instead of that, in the case of Tan Pua, he didn't look into that part of the role allocated to the political secretary. Instead, he was behaving as if he is the minister. He had the authority of a minister. So what a political secretary should do is to mix a lot with the people on the ground, hear them, listen to them, and report to the minister. So that the minister would be aware in your constituency, there is when the roads are not hard, or there is no water supply, or there is a lack of electricity and things like that. And what the people are thinking about politics, that is the job of the political secretary to report to the minister so that the minister can convey the information even to the cabinet. Then the cabinet will respond. If there is any shortage of anything, the cabinet can respond. But what he did was to go and meet every businessman, not from his constituency. He's behaving like he is the Minister of Finance. So he wants to make sure that things are done. And in one case, the complaint is that there was an agreement between the government and this developer that if the developer fails, the government can take over the business paying only RM1. Or it's the kind of thing that happens during Najib's time. When the developer has no money, he wants to borrow. The government makes sure that he cannot borrow from the banks. The banks won't give him a loan. So he got into trouble. He had to appeal to the government. The government said, okay, you can borrow, but these are the conditions. So the condition is very damning, very bad for the business, that he has to surrender the whole project to the government if he fails to complete the project. But he didn't fail, he succeeded. But the thing is that this, the government, when lending money, can impose rather, oppressive condition. And Tony Pua was using that agreement to threaten the businessman. But it's not only that businessman. There are many other businessmen who saw me and complain about Tony Pua and says that he is very arrogant. He threatens people. Of course, he's going to deny it. And I'm not going to say anything. It's up to the people to think whether what I say is true or what he says is true.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Jim from Times. So I have a few questions here. So can I make a conclusion that you just claim that the Chinese community isolate themselves from the Malaysian community? So if so, how should the Chinese community to adapt to the Malaysian community?
For the Chinese community, well, they have adapted to many other communities, but not in Malaysia. We can see that in the Philippines, in Thailand, there are a lot of Chinese there. In fact, some of their prime ministers are Chinese. Chuan Dik Pai is Chinese. Thaksin Shinawatra is Chinese. But they live the life, they follow the ways of the Thais. Among them, they speak Thai. They don't speak Chinese. And they adopt all the things that is Thai, even to the point of following the religion. But in Malaysia, no. You're a Chinese, you speak Chinese, and you adopt the national language of China. The Chinese here should speak actually Cantonese or Hokkien or things like that. But because you are looking at China, when China adopts Mandarin, you also adopt Mandarin. Now, whose policy are you following? But we are very tolerant. We accept that. If the Chinese wants to do that, okay, you can do that. But if you do that, you cannot be assimilated in the Malays. Whereas the Indians and the Arabs, when they come here, they lost their language completely. They are Malays. They speak Malay, their behavior is Malay. So for the Chinese community to be adapted, to be accepted, then they should do what these Indians and Arabs do. Adopt, become a Malaysian, identify completely with the indigenous people.
You said you had many questions. Would you like to ask a second question while you're... Okay. And I think we go to the other side of the room. Wow, our press are very silent today. Do we have a question? I can't see. Oh, yeah. But we do have questions on Facebook, so that's where we're going next.
You said at the beginning that you still want to bring down this government. Now, our top leaders are sitting down to decide when is the next election going to be. Some said, I'm just wondering what is your take on it, and also what is your advice to the opposition?
And you're representing?
I'm from CNA.
Well, I believe that the next election will be held sometime next year. Most probably around the middle of next year, which gives us about 6 months from now before the election is held. Now this election is going to be extremely important. Either you use this election to get rid of the groups of the corrupt people, or you allow them to come back. Once you come back, if they were to win, if the corrupt people were to win and form the government, that's the end of the fight against corruption. Because the corrupt government will ensure that through corruption, they will stay in power through different elections. So this is a very important election that I see. But we find, for example, that a lot of people talk about being tired of politics. They are fed up with politics. Yes, you can be fed up with politics. But if you don't come out and vote against those people are going to form the government. Because they will bring their supporters. Their supporters will continue to support them. They will pay money for the support, and they will win. Unless, of course, those who are against corruption, who want good government, they come out in numbers to vote against those people. In other words, vote for people who do not have a baggage of all kinds of crimes and abuses of power. So the next election is going to be a very important election in Malaysia. It is the last chance that we have to clean up this country. If you don't, then forever you're going to have bad government.
Now that the Court of Appeal upheld Sri Najib's conviction, do you think he can still make a political comeback?
Well, I can predict there are lots of things that are done which have never been done before. For example, when Anwar was arrested, he was detained all the time. He was arrested and detained even before the charges were made. And then the charges were brought in, he was tried, yes, okay, of course he was sentenced to jail. But before being sentenced to jail, just on the basis of some accusations against him, he was arrested and detained. But in the case of Najib, he is found guilty by a court of law. But he doesn't, he is treated not as a convict, who have been convicted, but as a free man, he can go to parliament and make speeches, he can campaign. Now he can even go outside the country. So lots of things are done by this government and the previous government, which has never been done before. So if you ask me whether he will come back as a prime minister, there is a possibility. He may get a pardon from the king, complete pardon. So then he can contest, and if he can contest, he may be chosen as prime minister if his party wins.
Mind-boggling. That's all I can say. Well, so Dr. Mahathir, we have a Facebook audience, an IG Live audience, and hopefully it's the young people that you are addressing who will go out and vote, register. Now that the age has been lowered, there's no excuse at all. So we have some questions from our Facebook viewers. This is from Amanda Yo. Why did you choose to share your viewpoints this way, through a book?
Well, I made a lot of speeches. I've talked to various groups, big and small, but still I find that people do not understand the situation. So some young people, for example, when they were born, this country had already developed to this extent. They seem to think that this is a situation in this country that will be forever. But we are not like that before. We were very poor before we rebuilt this country, and in the future there will be changes depending upon the thinking of the people. If they find that, well, let's forget about race. Yes, you can forget about race, but then the race will be there still, and they will not win elections if they forget about race. Because in Malaysia, people still think along racial lines. For example, the center of the cities are all mostly Chinese because they do business there. And you can't even put a Malay to contest in the middle of the city. But you cannot put a Chinese in the rural area because only Malays, there are Malays there, and they are thinking about race representation. So the political parties are race-based because they respond to the people. This is what the people want. If you ignore them, supposing you say, well, we don't care about race, we are multiracial, and then you put a Malay man in the middle of the city, he's not going to win. Or you put a Chinese in the rural areas, he's not going to win. So if you want to win, you have to respond to the racial feelings of the people who make up the voters there.
It's quite something to look forward into our future and see what we can see in this crystal ball, whether that situation is ever going to end. I think it will take some time. It will take strong will by us and see whether we have that will. Another Facebook question from Atrina, is it Atrina Adam, I think, or Afrina Adam? What do you hope to achieve, and what should Malaysians around the world take away from this book now that it's launched?
Well, one of the things that you can be proud of and talk about Malaysia is that this is a multiracial country. And normally a multiracial country is never stable. It cannot develop. And there will be fights between them. Even if there are slight changes in the perception of religion. And you know, some of these countries, they are Muslim countries, but they have different interpretation of religion and they fight and kill each other. But in Malaysia, despite having a country with 3 major races, with different language, different culture, different religion and all that, still, while there is, of course, some problem with them, they don't go violent. They are not violent. In this country, they are not violent. So the only violence that took place was in 1969. But since then, this country has remained stable. You know, before independence, I still remember the British and a lot of Malaysians saying, once it is independence, the Malays will confiscate all the property of the Chinese and they will, therefore they will take away the rights of the Chinese. Instead of that, the Malays invited the Chinese to work with them in the government. That was what happened first in Kuala Lumpur, where UMNO worked with MCA. Following that, Tunku Abdul Rahman decided that we should have Malays, Chinese and Indians in the government. So it is not something that was planned. It was a response to the reaction of the people. Because the people in KL during the 1952 municipal election, the Malays, the UMNO worked with MCA and they swept the board and wrote the Labour Party and all that couldn't make it way. So in response to that, Tunku decided that it is best to have all the racial parties in a coalition. They cannot be, the mistake made by Dato' On was that he wanted to open up UMNO to Malays, Chinese and Indian. He was rejected. But the Tunku was different. He didn't want them to join UMNO, but to form a coalition. And that has worked since then. Until now, we have always had a coalition government, never a single party government.
And do you think that by reading your book, you are going to change some mindsets, or do you feel like it's your duty to tell Malaysians the truth, or the importance of history and why and how we arrived at today?
Yeah, it is education actually. We have a need to know what is the origins of our country, how is it that this country has become multiracial, why are the people still living together, quite friendly with each other, but politically they are opposed to each other. These things we must know. And once we know why certain things happen, then we can make the correction. But if you don't understand why it is like that, you will not be able to make, not even to recognize the problem, much less in order to correct the situation.
Well, I'm wondering about the response and reaction once the book is out and more people read it, not only Tony Pua. So are you ready?
I'm ready to answer all questions. If they want to know why I say certain things in my book and they want me to elaborate, I'm quite ready to elaborate. Maybe in the forum with you as we did.
I once said to Dr. Mahathir, what is so well known about him is that it's all without fear or favor. So, you know, straight from the horse's mouth, or the author's mouth, as you would say. One last question from Facebook. Lisa Ayn, what are your hopes for the future generations of Malaysia?
Well, I think this country has great potential. The only thing is that if you want to be identified with your race, that's okay, but work together. There are many things that are common to us. I think we can work. We have done this. We have difference of opinion, Malays, Chinese and Indian, Chinese born Chinese schools and all that. That is something that the Malays objected to. But all this while, there have been Chinese schools. And we don't fight each other, we don't kill each other. So if you know the situation and you adjust your minds to accept what you cannot change, I think there is a future for this country.
I'm glad there's some positivity there, Dr. Mahathir, because I believe that if you read the book, with a lot of doors being opened, a lot of stories being told, a lot of situations being presented, hopefully the truth will out, as we say. So back to the media now. If we have, yes, we have a question there. Just give us your name and who you represent.
Hi, Tun Alia from Malaysia Kini. Do you recall, this is about the meeting with, what Tony Pua's allegation. This is about Tony Pua's allegation. Can you confirm, do you recall meeting with Joko Chandra or Joe Chan was involved in the Tower 106 exchange project, the RM1 allegation that Tony Pua was talking about? Do you recall the meeting that he referred to? And was he involved, was he still a director at Mulia at that time? Do you recall the meeting with Joe Chan, and was he involved? Was he still a director at Mulia Property at that time? This is about the RM1, the clause that you mentioned that Tony Pua said about the RM1.
RM1.
Yeah, the RM1.
Yeah, I remember that. Somebody I know brought this man, I didn't know this man, brought this man to me, and he said there was an agreement made by him and the government that if he fails to complete the project, the government can take over the project paying only RM1. That's what he told me. I don't know whether that is true or not. I haven't seen the agreement. But what happened was that during Najib's time, he was short of money. He needs to borrow money. But he went to every bank, everybody rejected him, and he had to go to the government. When he went to the government, they imposed this condition on him, that he will lend you money, but if you fail, we're going to take over the whole project. And because he was desperate, he needed the money, he signed, but he completed the project. But Tony Pua was trying to say that he didn't complete the project. Therefore, he is going to take away the project from him. This is what that man told me. Whether it is true or not, I cannot verify. But why should anybody come and tell me such a story unless he is having a problem? He's having a problem with Tony Pua. You see, so I told the story in my book about that because this is an